Dream of the Red Chamber Chapter 71.
It is a massive chapter.
Yeah, it really is. And we're focusing on Grandmother Gia, who is frequently referred to as Gia Mother in the text, and a celebration that operates on a scale most of us would, probably associate with hosting a global summit today.
It really is a staggering logistical undertaking.
Yeah.
And as we guide you through these source materials today, the overarching theme I want you to keep in mind is that this event is not really a party in the modern sense at all.
Right.
It is a physical, deeply exhausting manifestation of power, of wealth, and of strict social obligations. For the elite of this era, a celebration of this magnitude is a highly choreographed performance of a family standing within the empire. It is absolutely not a casual gathering for leisure.
No, not at all. And that performative aspect comes into sharp focus when you look at the patriarch of the family, Gia Zing.
Oh yeah, poor Jia Zing.
Right. The text establishes that he has just returned to the capital after years of working away from his family. He's been out dealing with the daily realities and, the extreme pressures of being a government official.
Out in the provinces.
Yeah. And he finally gets home and is granted a 1-month leave to rest. And the text makes a really big point of highlighting his physical state.
He's not doing great.
No, he's feeling his age, his body is visibly declining, and he is just deeply fatigued from his official duties.
He just wants a break.
Exactly. His primary desire upon returning is to delegate every single household duty to others so he can simply read his books, play some chess, and drink with his literati companions.
What's fascinating here is the sheer paradox of his situation. I mean, Jia Zheng desires quiet family time and a chance to recover from the physical toll of his career.
Yeah.
But his societal position, coupled with the rigid structure of his family, demands the exact opposite.
Right, because of the timing.
Exactly. He returns to the capital right as Grandmother Jia's 80th birthday approaches, with the actual birthday falling on August 3rd. So quiet rest becomes completely impossible.
It's just out of the question.
The obligations of his status entirely override his personal needs. He might want to play chess, but duty dictates he must co-host this 9-day imperial-level event.
And the logistics required for that event are just incredibly complex. I mean, to prevent overcrowding, the family has to split the venues entirely.
They have to use 2 different estates.
Right. They designate the Ningguo mansion exclusively to host the male officials, while the Rongguo mansion hosts the female guests, which are often referred to as the inner chamber guests.
And it's not just the mansions themselves.
No, in addition to prepping both mansions, they have to outfit these huge pavilions in the Grandview Garden just to give people places to retreat and rest during the festivities.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you are seeing a society that is fundamentally obsessed with order and categorization.
Oh, absolutely.
The guest list isn't just large, it is rigidly separated by rank and demographic over the course of the schedule, which runs all the way from July 28th to August 5th.
And the daily breakdown of that schedule tells a story all its own. Day 1, July 28th, is reserved exclusively for royalty and high nobility. So we're talking the princes, princesses, and royal consorts.
The absolute top tier.
Right. And then the very next day, July 29th, the guest list shifts to the governors, the commanders, and their titled wives.
Notice the immediate step down in the hierarchy there.
The
The royal bloodlines command the opening day, which sets the tone of supreme imperial favor. The governors and commanders who hold immense practical power in the empire are still relegated to the second day. And then, on July 30th, the doors finally open to lesser officials and distant relatives.
It takes until August 1st for the event to even transition into sequential family banquets. On August 4th, the entire Jia clan, young and old, finally gathers.
Which brings us to the very end of the line.
Right. Finally, on August 5th, the household managers, individuals like Lai Da and Lin Zixiao, they pool their own money for a final banquet.
The strict boundaries here are vital to understanding the culture. You do not mix the royal family with the local governors.
Definitely not.
You separate the men and the women into entirely different mansions to maintain propriety. And you certainly do not mix the masters with the managers. The structure of those 9 days is basically a mirror of the empire's architecture. Everyone has their assigned place, their assigned day, and their assigned level of access to the matriarch.
And that level of access brings us to the wave of gifts arriving in early July. The text catalogs items that are honestly difficult to even conceptualize.
They're staggering.
Staggering. From the emperor himself, delivered via the Ministry of Rites, come gold and jade rui scepters, 4 bolts of uniquely patterned silk, 4 gold and jade rings, and 500 taels of silver.
Just to give you some context on those items, rui scepters are curved, decorative objects that serve as talismans. The word rui translates roughly to "as you wish."
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they are profound symbols of authority and good fortune, making them the ultimate imperial blessing. And on top of that, a tael is a standard unit of weight for silver currency.
So 500 taels.
500 taels is a massive fortune. It is enough to sustain an ordinary family for a lifetime, and here it's presented as a mere birthday pleasantry.
Unbelievable. Then we see the gifts from imperial concubine Yuanyang, who is a member of the Jia family who was elevated to the royal court.
Right.
She sends a solid gold statue of the god of longevity, an eaglewood walking stick, kinen beads, special fushou incense, pairs of gold and silver ingots, 12 bolts of silk, and jade cups.
Her gifts are intensely symbolic. Kinen is an incredibly rare, highly prized, and fragrant variety of agar wood.
Okay.
And the fushou incense incorporates characters representing blessing and longevity. These aren't just expensive items. They are carefully chosen representations of eternal wealth and health, meant to publicly reinforce her filial piety from within the imperial palace.
So the family sets up this massive table in the main hall, covers it in a red felt carpet, and lays out all these exquisite treasures for grandmother Jia to inspect.
The grand reveal.
Exactly. And the text notes that she looks at this spread of literal emperor-given treasures for a day or two, and then she gets bored.
She just gets bored.
She tells Fengji, Wang Shifeng, to pack it all away, stating she will look at them again when she's bored.
This moment brilliantly illustrates how extreme privilege isolates a person from the material value of objects.
Yeah.
When you hear about a solid gold statue or a pile of silver ingots, it sounds like an unimaginable marvel. But to grandmother Jia, it has become clutter.
Literal clutter.
The gifts are no longer items of wonder. They function merely as receipts of social transactions.
Right.
Once she has verified the transaction, that the emperor acknowledges her status, that her granddaughter remains dutiful, the physical objects lose all their interest. The wealth itself is entirely normalized.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Moving to the actual event day on July 28th, the atmosphere is electric. Both mansions are completely transformed.
Visually stunning.
Lanterns are hanging everywhere, colorful silk decorations adorn the walls, special screens are set up, and the sound of drums and music echoes through the surrounding streets and alleys.
But inside,
Right, but inside Ronking Hall, where the VIP women gather, the physical seating arrangements dictate the true power dynamics of the room.
the spatial dynamics are enforced with absolute precision. Despite it being her 80th birthday, grandmother Jia does not occupy the highest seat of honor.
No, she doesn't.
The South and North princesses, possessing royal blood, are seated at the very top. Grandmother Jia sits on the lower right, visually demonstrating that even a venerated matriarch must defer to the royal family.
And the most striking visual detail involves the daughters-in-law, so that's Xing, Wang, Yuxi, and Fengji. They are not permitted to sit at all.
At all.
They stand behind grandmother Jia in a formation the text describes as wild geese wings. They just hover there, waiting to serve the royal guests and their mother-in-law, physically manifesting their subservience for the duration of the event.
The physical toll of standing in that formation for hours is immense. Yet the rigidity of the social structure isn't just in how people stand, it dictates how they are allowed to communicate.
Oh, the bureaucracy of it.
The text details the process required just to select the opera play for the evening's entertainment, revealing a stunning display of hierarchy.
So it tracks a single piece of paper, the playlist for the opera, and its journey is a perfect microcosm of the society. It starts outside the inner curtain with a young, uncut-haired boy.
Right, who hands it to a servant wife.
Oh.
But because she lacks the social clearance to approach the inner circle, her journey ends right there. She has to pass it to manager Lin Zixiu's wife.
Who then places it on a small tea tray. She slips it through the bamboo curtain and hands that tray to a maid named Paifeng.
Paifeng takes it to the upper tables, handing it to Yuxi, one of the daughters-in-law we just mentioned, standing in that wing formation.
And finally, Yuxi presents it to the Nanan Princess Dowager so she can select a play.
That is a 6-step physical relay.
6 steps, just to hand a guest a menu. I mean, you can imagine the absurdity of applying a 6-step bureaucratic approval process to hand a wine list to a friend at a dinner party today.
That would be comical.
Right. It requires passing from someone on the street to a housekeeper, to a manager, to a maid, to a family member, and finally to the guest.
It effectively creates a buffer of purity and status. The Nanan Princess Dowager cannot interact with the lower echelons, so the document must be socially laundered as it moves up the chain.
Socially laundered, that's a great way to put it.
And speaking of the dowager, her subsequent interactions with the younger generation of the Jia family reveal another fascinating layer of elite social politics.
Yes, the Nanan Princess Dowager asks Grandmother Jia if she can see the young ladies of the house, and Grandmother Jia immediately deploys an excuse.
A very convenient excuse.
She claims they are weak, sick, and too shy around strangers, so she simply had them stay back to watch the house. But the narrative reveals that Grandmother Jia actually hired a completely separate private theater troupe to play exclusively for the girls in another hall.
So they aren't sick at all.
No, they are having their own private gathering away from the formal adults.
It functions as a polite fiction. Grandmother Jia knows the girls are perfectly healthy, and the dowager likely suspects it as well. It's a calculated dance of modesty, feigning that her granddaughters are too humble to be presented.
But the dowager insists, so Fengji is sent to fetch them. The 5 girls, Bo Chai, Dayu, Tanxun, Shangyu, and Baoqian, they arrive, accompanied by Baoyu.
Ah, yes, Boyu.
And the text notes that Baoyu is actually using his time away from the main party to kneel in a temple, reciting the Security and Longevity Sutra for his grandmother.
That specific sutra is a Buddhist text recited to accumulate spiritual merit, which is then dedicated to extending the life and protecting the health of a loved one.
Yeah.
It is a highly tangible act of filial piety, offering spiritual currency rather than physical gold.
So when the girls are presented, the Nanan Princess Dowager is highly physically affectionate. She takes Tanxun and Bao Kai by the hands, examines Dayu and Bao Qin closely, and showers them all with praise.
And then come the gifts.
Right, then she brings out 5 sets of gifts. 5 golden jade rings, and 5 strings of fragrant wrist beads. And the North King Princess follows suit, handing out an identical 5 sets of gifts.
This raises an important question for you to consider regarding the subtle language of wealth. When the Nanan Dowager hands over these exquisite gold and jade rings, she smiles and says, "Don't laugh at these. Keep them to reward your maids."
It is a remarkable piece of dialogue. She is handing over priceless jewelry and preemptively asking them not to mock it.
It is the elite politics of the humble brag. Handing out gold and jade and labeling them as mere maid trinkets is a highly calculated display of status disguised as modesty.
Wow.
By stating that her wealth is so vast that gold and jade are only fit for servants, she forces the Jia family to acknowledge her superior financial standing. She maintains the veneer of polite humility while executing a decisive social power move.
It's brilliant, but also just so layered. And as the night progresses, the flawless facade of this glittering event begins to crack under its own weight.
The fatigue sets in.
The sheer exhaustion of sustaining this performance catches up with everyone involved. Despite the gold statues, the private theater troupes, and the 6-step menu deliveries, the VIPs depart early.
They don't even stay for the whole thing.
No, the princesses excuse themselves before the banquet concludes, citing that they feel unwell. They even admit among themselves that if the event wasn't socially mandatory, if it wasn't Grandmother Jia's milestone 80th birthday, they wouldn't have attended at all.
You cannot sustain that level of performative grace indefinitely. The obligations of high society prove punishing for the guests and equally punishing for the guest of honor.
Absolutely.
The next day, Grandmother Jia is completely wiped out, absolutely refusing to see anyone. The physical toll on an 80-year-old woman is simply too great. But perhaps the heaviest burden falls on the people actually executing the event.
And that brings us to a moment in the text that feels incredibly grounded. We follow Yushi, one of the primary managers and daughters-in-law who spent the entire day standing in that wild geese wing formation, managing the flow of the Rongo mansion.
The whole day on her feet.
Right. It is late at night, the royal guests are gone, and Yushi is starting.
The contrast is striking. We're looking at 500 taels of silver and longevity statues. Now we are examining the gritty, physical reality of event planning.
She goes to Fengji's room, hoping to find something to eat. But Fengji isn't resting either. She is upstairs meticulously inventorying the new decorative screens they received as gifts.
Never stops.
Pinger, a senior maid, is in the room folding clothes. Pinger offers Yushi a small snack of dim sum to tide her over.
Just a bite.
Yeah, but Yushi responds by saying, "I'm so hungry I can't bear it." She refuses the small snack because she desperately needs a substantial meal. She wanders out into the garden, hoping to find the younger girls and whatever actual food they might have left over.
It is a masterful stroke of realism within the narrative.
Yeah.
You can throw the most opulent, perfectly choreographed 9-day imperial party in the empire. You can receive gifts directly from the Ministry of Rites. But behind the scenes, the organizers are still skipping meals. They are standing on their feet for 14 hours, navigating complex family dynamics, and frantically searching for leftovers in the middle of the night.
It's so relatable.
The extreme wealth of the household does not insulate the organizers from the extreme physical labor required to maintain the illusion of effortless grace.
Yushi, who is the mistress of the East Mansion, essentially functioning as the head of a major division or a visiting executive, she walks into the Grandview Garden, and instead of tight security, she finds a complete breakdown of order.
Chaos.
Total chaos. The main doors and side doors are wide open, the decorative lanterns are burning bright, and the personnel who are supposed to be guarding the gates are just completely missing.
We really should pause and establish the gravity of this. In a highly structured society, open doors at night are not just a minor mistake.
Right, it's a huge deal.
The Grandview Garden is an inner sanctum.
Yeah.
Leaving those doors open and the lights on with zero personnel manning the posts is a massive security risk. It's a glaring sign of institutional decay.
Because the official bosses aren't looking.
Exactly. When leadership is distracted by a flagship event, the day-to-day operations tend to crumble. The frontline workers know management's attention is entirely diverted.
So, Yushi tells her young maid to go find the guards. The maid checks the guard room, but it's empty. She then heads out to the Luding, which is a waiting area outside the second gate.
Think of it as a break room where the managing women are supposed to gather while on duty.
Right, a break room. And there she finds two older women referred to as the Pozi. Are they patrolling? No, they are sitting in the break room, dividing up leftover fruits and vegetables.
They are basically securing company perks on company time.
While the front doors of the compound are wide open.
To understand why they feel so bold, we have to look at the class dynamics of the Pozi. These are older servant women, often married or widowed, who have been in the household for decades.
They've seen it all.
They have seen generations of management come and go. They are cynical, they are entrenched, and they are relegated to mundane tasks. Over time, that breeds a very specific kind of apathy. They feel safe, slacking off, because they assume the leadership is too busy schmoozing with the VIPs to police the break room.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the confrontation that follows is just an incredible study in escalating workplace conflict. The young maid walks in and tries to pull rank. She announces that the mistress of the East Mansion is standing right outside waiting and has orders for them.
She fully expects them to jump up and apologize.
But the older women just brush her off. They claim the managers just left and argue that they merely watch the house. They say they don't run errands and suggest she go find an errand runner instead.
They are stonewalling her by applying the narrowest possible definition of their job description.
Not my job.
Exactly. It is the 18th century equivalent of an IT guy watching you struggle with a jammed printer and setting his coffee because you didn't submit a formal help desk ticket. It is a classic bureaucratic defense mechanism.
The young maid does not back down, though. She loses her temper and accuses them of playing favorites. She says, and this is a nuclear insult, she says, if this were a tip-off or a reward from Lian's second wife.
Meaning Wang Shifeng.
Right, the formidable operations manager of the West Mansion. She says if it were from her, you'd be running like dogs to get it. But because it's my boss, you don't care.
What's fascinating here is how the older women hit back. The text notes they had been drinking some wine, which definitely lowered their inhibitions, but rather than being cowed by the young maid exposing their corruption, they go on the offensive.
They really do.
They tell the maid each family has its own doors, and then they follow it up with a highly vivid idiom. Clear water over mixed noodles, you eat and I watch.
Clear water over mixed noodles, you eat, and I watch. It paints quite a picture. But what are the practical implications of that phrase in this specific context?
They are outlining a strict divisional boundary. They are saying to her, our business is completely separate from yours. We do not share in your profits, so we do not take your orders. These older women belong to the West Mansion. They report up through Wang Zifeng's chain of command. The young maid and Yu Shi are from the East Mansion.
So it's a turf war.
Exactly.
Yeah.
By using this idiom, they are flat out refusing to be bossed around by a visiting executive from a different division. It is the ultimate, you're not my real boss maneuver.
which naturally infuriates the young maid. Her face goes white, and she storms back to report the insubordination. Meanwhile, Yushi has wandered deeper into the garden and arrived at a place called the Happy Red Court.
A completely different environment.
The atmosphere here is a stark contrast to the dark, empty gates. It is a serene, high-status VIP lounge. Yushi is relaxing. She's eating meat and vegetarian pastries brought by the chief maid, Jaren. Sitting nearby are some young ladies of the house, Baoqin and Zhang, along with nuns from the Dezang temple who are sipping tea and telling entertaining stories.
It's a very carefully curated vibe.
And then the angry young maid just bursts into the room.
Which instantly shatters the delicate social equilibrium of the space.
She just blurts out the entire confrontation. She repeats the older women's insults verbatim in front of the other executives, the nuns, and the staff.
It's excruciating.
She is literally sitting there with a pastry in her hand, suddenly faced with the reality that her authority has been publicly undermined by low-level staff from another department. She asks, with a cold laugh, who are these two? She is forced to perform her anger.
I'm glad you brought up the performative aspect. Consider how deeply awkward this is. Imagine a senior director getting sharply disrespected by a junior analyst from a different department on a company-wide video call.
Everyone is watching.
The director has to react, or they lose their authority in front of everyone on the call.
But if Yushi escalates a turf war right in the middle of a major celebration, it reflects poorly on her judgment too, right? How does the group handle that tension?
This is where we see the peacemakers spring into action. The nuns and Shirin immediately step in to de-escalate. They deeply recognize the cultural weight of Mianzi, or face.
Right.
Face is your social currency, your dignity, and the perceived weight of your authority. Yushi has just lost face. So to restore it without causing a massive scene, the group invokes the CEO's birthday. They remind her that today is Grandmother Jia's 1000th autumn, pleading with her not to get angry on such an auspicious day.
They also minimize the threat. They brush off the older women as just confused old nurses. Jayan even physically pulls the angry young maid out of the room to separate the catalyst from the executive.
By dismissing the older women as senile fools and invoking the sacred nature of the holiday, the group provides Yushi with a socially acceptable off-ramp.
An excuse to let it go.
Right. They are offering her a narrative. You are right to be angry, and your authority is unquestioned, but you are choosing to be magnanimous because of the festival. It allows her to back down without looking weak.
And Yushi takes the off-ramp. She agrees that if it weren't for the old lady's birthday, she wouldn't let it slide, and says to just leave it for now. But the tension is just swept under the rug. She is still seething. The disrespect happened, and no one has actually been punished for the open doors or the insubordination.
Unresolved tension in a bureaucracy is like a vacuum. Someone will always step into that void and use the lingering resentment to their own advantage.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Into this void steps a character named Zhao Rui's wife. Jaren, who is still trying to handle things quietly, sends a different maid out to fetch the offending women. By sheer coincidence, that maid bumps into Zhao Rui's wife and spills the whole story. Why is Zhao Rui's wife such a pivotal figure in this hierarchy?
If we connect this to the bigger picture of informal power, Zurui's wife is the perfect case study. If you examine the official org chart, she does not hold a senior management title.
Okay.
However, she is Lady Wang's dowry servant.
How does that change her status?
A dowry servant functions almost like an untouchable chief of staff. When Lady Wang married into the Jia family decades ago, she brought her own personal staff with her. Zurui's wife is loyal primarily to Lady Wang, not to the broader household's HR structure.
Ah, I see.
Because of that historical, personal tie to one of the highest-ranking women in the family, her proximity to power is unparalleled. The text describes her as Guai Hua, meaning slick and cunning. She knows exactly how to curry favor and operate outside the standard chain of command.
She hears about this relatively minor squabble between the young maid and the two break room attendants, and she sees a golden opportunity. She doesn't try to calm the waters at all. Instead, she rushes straight into the Happy Red Court and weaponizes the situation.
She gasps and validates Yushi's anger, claiming the household has become far too undisciplined.
She points out the security risk, telling Yushi the doors are open, the candles are lit, anyone could walk in. And she strategically mentions that Wang Qi, the manager of the West Mansion, had specifically ordered those doors locked during the festivities. She even loudly declares, if I had been there, I would have slapped their faces.
Notice the psychological maneuver here. She doesn't actually care about the open doors.
Not at all.
She is employing weaponized righteousness. She aligns herself with both Yuxi's injured pride and Wang Shifeng's official policies. She positions herself as the fierce defender of the corporate order, validating the executive's anger just to build her own social capital.
Zhu Rui's wife takes insubordination by lower-level staff and frames it as a capital offense against the entire institution.
It is a brilliant, if malicious, strategy. By validating Yuxi, she gains authorization to take control of the narrative.
She vents her frustration, and Zhu Rui's wife assures her, "Don't worry, just wait until the party is over. I will tell the managers to beat them half to death." She promises the doors are now closed and locked. She effectively becomes the informal enforcer for an executive who doesn't even have direct authority over those workers.
Which brings us to the ruthless execution of her plan. She completely bypasses the middle managers and takes us straight to the top of the West Mansion.
Zhu Rui's wife gets a moment alone with Wang Shifeng. When she reports the incident, she dramatically exaggerates the threat. She describes these two older women as fierce bugs, a total menace to the household's discipline.
A menace.
She frames it as a diplomatic issue, warning Shifeng that if she doesn't punish them, Yu Shi is going to lose face permanently. She practically forces Shifeng's hand.
Let's look at Wang Shifeng's response, because it is perhaps the most revealing moment in the excerpt regarding how executive power actually functions.
Xifeng doesn't ask for an investigation. She doesn't call the older women in for a hearing to get their side of the story. Her response is chillingly casual. She says, essentially, write down their names, tie them up after the festivities, throw them in the horse stables, and let Yushimi deal with them later. What's the big deal?
What's the big deal? She authorizes the physical binding and purging of two long-term employees without a second thought. And why does she agree so quickly? Because it is a cheap trade.
It costs her nothing.
Exactly. The actual infraction of the doors being left open is totally irrelevant to her in this moment. She is sacrificing two bottom-tier workers to smooth over relations with a fellow executive from the East Mansion. It is purely transactional, interdepartmental diplomacy.
And then the text delivers the underlying motive for this entire sequence of events. We find out exactly why Zhu Rui's wife was so eager to intervene and escalate the break room squabble into a purging. The source text reveals that Zhu Rui's wife was thrilled because she already had a pre-existing grudge against these two older women.
She successfully weaponized the entire institutional hierarchy. She leveraged the mistress of the East Mansion's bruised ego and Wang Shifeng's casual ruthlessness to eliminate her personal rivals.
She immediately sends a boy to the management office to relay Shifeng's orders, ensuring the two older women are tied up and thrown into the stables. She used a crisis, she didn't start to target people she didn't like, and emerged looking like a loyal, indispensable hero to the leadership of both mansions.
It is a breathtakingly efficient bureaucratic maneuver. The rules of the game in the Jia household are rarely written down. They are constantly being negotiated in the break rooms, the hallways, and through informal channels like dowry servants. Okay, let's shift scenes.
It's the evening before a monumental event.
The matriarch's birthday.
Yes, Grandmother Jia, who holds absolute authority over everyone, is having this huge birthday celebration. The lamps are just being lit across the courtyards. But our story doesn't start in the glowing center of the party preparations.
No, we are out in the dark, drafty corridors.
With a mid-level manager. Her name is Lin Zixao's wife. And the text notes she has to take a carriage just to get across the estate to deliver a message to the household's equivalent of a CEO.
Fangji. And the fact that she requires a carriage to cross her own workplace, it really highlights the physical isolation between the different tiers of power.
It's not like she can just pop over to HR.
Exactly. This isn't a modern office where you can just walk down the hall.
Yeah.
The physical distance mirrors the bureaucratic distance.
Right.
When Lin's wife finally reaches the CEO's quarters, the maids turn her away. They tell her the CEO is resting and instruct her to go see the other executives.
Specifically, Li Wan and Yu Shi.
Right, over in a different section of the estate called Daxiang Village.
So she makes that massive trek, finally finds Yu Shi, and gets an incredibly frustrating response. She essentially apologizes for the wasted trip.
Which is just...
She dismisses the entire issue Lin's wife came to report, saying it wasn't a big deal to begin with. Then she blames a tattletale, Zhu's wife, for exaggerating things to the CEO in the first place.
Yeah.
Yu Shi even stops the other executive, Li Wan, from explaining the original issue to Lin's wife. She simply tells the manager to go home and rest.
This dismissal is our first real glimpse into the bureaucratic friction of this estate. On the surface, being told to go home by a superior sounds like a relief.
Sure, clock out early.
Right. But in a high-stakes environment like this, a lack of clear information is dangerous. Lynn's wife is a manager, so she needs to know why she was summoned and why she is now being dismissed.
Yeah, she's flying blind.
Exactly. By keeping her in the dark and blaming another servant, Yushi is inadvertently creating an information vacuum. And in any deeply political organization, an information vacuum is immediately filled by rumors.
Which brings us to a really pivotal encounter. On her way out, Lin's wife runs into concubine Zhao. And concubine Zhao is a character who absolutely thrives in that exact vacuum.
Oh, she loves it.
She loves gossip. She is deeply connected with all the female managers across the estate, keeping her ear constantly to the ground. Before Lin's wife even really explains why she is wandering the corridors so late.
Concubine Zhao already knows 80 to 90% of the story. Concubine Zhao is executing a highly calculated maneuver here. She doesn't just passively reveal that she knows the gossip, she actively frames it. She tells Lin's wife that while the actual issue was minor, the real problem is that the leadership made her run this useless errand.
She plants the seed.
Right, she plants the idea that they're being too arrogant, intentionally mocking Lin's wife and playing her for a fool. We are watching the Whisper Network operate in real time here.
It's so fast.
Information travels incredibly fast through these unofficial channels, but it never travels neutrally. It is always spun to serve an agenda.
I want you to think about your own workplace or your social circles for a second. Have you ever had someone pull you aside after a confusing meeting and whisper, "I can't believe they made you do that"? They're totally disrespecting your time.
It's a classic move.
It completely changes your perception of the event. Suddenly, what might have been a simple administrative miscommunication feels like a targeted personal insult. It is a classic manipulation tactic used to turn people against leadership.
And concubine Zhao is weaponizing that exact feeling. She is intentionally priming Lin's wife to feel resentful. In an environment as hierarchical and tense as this 18th century estate, where your social standing and survival depend entirely on the whims of leadership.
Resentment is a highly volatile fuel.
Yes. Concubine Zhao is essentially pouring gasoline on the floor and waiting for a spark.
And that spark comes almost immediately. Lin's wife leaves concubine Zhao, reaches a side door of the estate, and is suddenly ambushed by two crying maids.
Little girls, really.
Yeah, the source material is specific here. These are little girls, just 7 or 8 years old, begging this mid-level manager for help. Feng Ji ordered someone to literally tie these mothers up in the horse stables.
Hide up in the stables.
So these little girls are terrified, begging Lin's wife to intervene. But Lin's wife, who has just been primed by concubine Zhao to resent the leadership, refuses to get involved directly.
He doesn't want the heat.
Right. She essentially tells the girls that if she steps in, she will just draw the CEO's anger onto herself. But she doesn't just walk away.
No, she does something much more clever.
She gives these crying girls a fascinating piece of political advice by pointing out a massive bureaucratic loophole.
The advice she gives is a masterstroke of passing the buck. She tells one of the girls, look, your sister is married to the son of Old Woman Fei. Old Woman Fei is the dowry servant of Lady Xing. Go tell your sister to have her mother-in-law Fei talk to Lady Xing, and this will all go away.
Let's clarify that term because it's crucial. What exactly is a dowry servant?
Well, a dowry servant didn't just apply for a job at this estate. She came as part of the property when her mistress, Lady Xing, married into the family.
So they are a package deal.
Exactly. This means Old Woman Fei's loyalty, her livelihood, and her entire identity are tied exclusively to Lady Xing, not to the broader household, and certainly not to the CEO, Feng Ji.
Oh, I see.
By invoking Old Woman Fei, Lin's wife is shifting the grievance out of the standard chain of command and dropping it directly into the lap of a rival political faction within the family.
It is a brilliant, self-preserving middle management move. She avoids a direct confrontation with a terrifying boss, but she still manages to cause a massive headache for that boss.
A very calculated headache.
She knows that by routing this grievance to Lady Xing's faction, the explosion will be huge, but her own fingerprints won't be anywhere near the detonator.
Which brings us to Old Woman Fei herself. To understand why this match lights so quickly, we have to look at Fei's current state of mind. The source tells us she used to have a significant amount of influence in the household.
But she lost it.
She lost it when her mistress, Lady Xing, lost favor with the ultimate boss, Grandmother Jia. So Fei is currently sitting around, deeply envious of all the other servants who are visibly running things for the big birthday preparations.
She feels entirely sidelined and irrelevant.
Exactly.
And a sidelined, resentful person who suddenly gets handed a legitimate grievance is a dangerous thing. Faye's reaction is entirely theatrical. She gets drunk, curses loudly at a dividing wall just to ensure people hear her making a scene, and then she runs straight to her mistress, Lady Xing.
And the way she spins the story to Lady Xing is an absolute masterclass in public relations.
It really is.
Notice what Faye leaves out of her report. She begs Lady Xing for mercy, crying that her poor elderly relative simply exchanged 2 harmless words with a little maid. And as a result, the CEO was tricked into tying her up in a horse stable to be beaten.
Right. She completely erases the fact that her relatives were drunk and causing a massive scene.
Entirely. She frames the entire incident as an unprovoked, malicious attack by the CEO's people directly against Lady Xing's people.
So Old Woman Faye delivers this highly edited, incredibly biased version of events. But why is Lady Xing buy this story so easily? I mean, she is an aristocrat. You would think she might ask for a few more details before declaring war over a stable dispute.
Because Lady Xing is already a powder keg. Her internal narrative is so overwhelmingly negative toward the CEO that any story confirming her bias is accepted instantly.
Let's look at her recent history in the household. The text outlines a series of deep, humiliating grudges.
Oh, she has a list.
A long list. For instance, she recently tried to procure a concubine for her own husband. Specifically, she tried to acquire the matriarch's personal maid, a woman named Yuanyang.
And she failed completely.
Which must have been a highly public loss of face for someone in her position.
Precisely. To make matters worse, she has to live with the daily reality that the matriarch, Grandmother Jia, openly and obviously favors the CEO, Fengji, over her.
Which hurts.
In a hierarchy built entirely on the matriarch's favor, that isn't just an emotional slight, it is a tangible loss of power and security.
There is also a detail in the source about a recent royal visit that really twists the knife. During a visit from the Princess of Nanyang, the matriarch only brought out one specific granddaughter, Tanshan, to meet the royalty.
She completely ignored Lady Xing's stepdaughter, Yingchen.
Just left her out.
That is the equivalent of pretending Lady Xing's branch of the family doesn't even exist during the most important social event of the year.
The sting of that public invisibility is profound.
And finally, you have to factor in the constant whispering of the servants. They know Lady Xing is bitter, so they continuously feed her narrative.
They whisper that the CEO only flatters the matriarch so she can turn around and bully Lady Xing's husband.
Right. They've convinced Lady Xing that the CEO is the sole reason the matriarch dislikes her in the first place.
When you lay out all those grievances, the psychological phenomenon of confirmation bias becomes undeniable. Lady Xing doesn't need to fact-check Old Woman Faye's story. She doesn't demand peer-reviewed evidence about who started the fight in the courtyard.
No, she absorbs this grievance immediately because it perfectly fuels the hatred she needs for the next day. The source text explicitly states the theme here. A resentful person intentionally breeds resentment.
The danger of confirmation bias in an organizational setting is that it blinds leadership to the actual root of a problem.
Lady Xing isn't trying to solve a disciplinary issue regarding drunk servants. She is collecting ammunition for a proxy war.
And she is going to carry all of that hidden, boiling animosity straight into the biggest public event of the year.
The transition in the text from the dark, whispering corridors of the night before into the morning of the birthday celebration is absolutely jarring.
The scale of this event is staggering. We are suddenly looking at the absolute pinnacle of wealth, order, and power.
Grandmother Jia, the matriarch, is in a fantastic mood.
She is dressed casually, lounging on a central couch, outfitted with plush pillows and a footstool. Baoyu is right there at her feet, massaging her legs.
The physical staging of this room is a literal map of the household's power dynamics.
It really paints a picture.
The matriarch is lounging comfortably, which is a massive display of privilege in a society governed by strict physical formalities. Meanwhile, the younger women of the house are seated around her in a tight ring on short, rigid stools.
And we're talking about all the key young ladies here: Bao Chai, Bao Qin, Daiyu, Xianggun, Yingchen, Tankyun, and Shichun. Explain the significance of those short stools, because to a modern listener, sitting on a stool just sounds like normal furniture.
Imagine the physical toll of this room over several hours. The matriarch is completely supported by pillows, but the younger women are perched on tiny backless stools where they must maintain perfect, rigid posture.
Oh, that sounds exhausting.
It is a constant visual and physical reminder that their comfort is entirely secondary to hers. The space is designed so that everything and everyone orbits around the central gravity of the matriarch's ease.
That physical demand extends far beyond the inner circle, too. Aunt Shu is the guest of honor, and the male guests are sitting out in the outer corridors. The text describes an endless procession of kowtowing. The female guests bow first, followed by the male guests.
The matriarch is so secure in her power that she casually waves from her couch and says they can skip the formalities.
But the hierarchy demands the performance anyway. The text notes that this bowing, led by Lai Da from the inner courtyard all the way out to the grand hall, takes the time of 2 to 3 meals to complete.
Think about the sheer duration and physical exhaustion of that display. The time of 2 to 3 meals translates to hours of continuous kneeling, bowing, standing, and waning.
Hours.
It is an overwhelming spectacle of subservience. And while hundreds of people are physically exhausting themselves to show respect, the estate is releasing massive cages of birds into the courtyard to generate good karma. And Jia, she is burning elaborate paper offerings to the heavens.
It is a flawless picture of perfect harmony and tradition.
Amidst all this heavy tradition, the matriarch does something that really flexes her absolute arbitrary power.
Right. Out of all the guests, she notices 2 visiting girls, Siluan and Siqi.
Simply because she thinks they are pretty, and because they speak and act a little differently than the rest of the highly disciplined household, she decides she likes them.
So, from the comfort of her couch, she casually orders the CEO, Fengji, to keep them at the estate for a few days to play.
The reaction to this whim is deeply telling. The mothers of these 2 girls rely heavily on the CEO and the matriarch for social favors and support.
So when the matriarch makes this sudden request, altering their family's plans entirely, the mothers eagerly agree.
They don't truly have a choice, but they must frame their compliance as a joyous honor. The scene shifts.
Beginning with a confrontation that really sets the tone for the entire birthday sequence.
Right, the incident with Lady Xing.
Yeah, we drop right into this very public, very passive-aggressive showdown over 2 tied-up servants. Lady Xing steps up and requests the release of these 2 older female servants who had been tied up by the incredibly sharp and powerful manager, Sister Feng, Wang Shifeng.
And Lady Xing frames this entirely as a matter of Buddhist mercy.
Exactly. She says, it's bad karma to punish people during the old dowager's birthday. She makes this seemingly benevolent request in front of a massive audience and then just immediately bounces. She gets in her carriage and leaves Sister Feng totally stranded.
That moment is just a masterclass in weaponized etiquette.
So, knowing the chronic tensions between the elder branch, which Lady Xing represents, and the younger branch that Sister Feng manages, how much of this is genuinely about being kind?
Virtually nothing. It has nothing to do with kindness or mercy. It is a highly calculated move to make Sister Feng lose face in front of everyone.
Total proxy war.
Exactly. Lady Xing deeply resents that Sister Feng, who is actually her own daughter-in-law, actively manages the household on behalf of the younger branch, specifically for Wang Furen.
Right.
So by choosing this hyper-public arena of the matriarch's birthday, Lady Xing traps her. She takes the moral high ground of the celebration to force Sister Feng into a corner. It intentionally makes the manager look cruel, disrespectful, and basically out of step with the family's supposed piety.
And Sister Feng's immediate reaction really highlights the dilemma she's in. The text says her face turns purple with suppressed anger and humiliation.
She's just seething.
But she tries to defend herself, right? She uses the very foundation of their social structure or strict etiquette. She points out she only punished those servants because they offended a guest.
Yushi, the eldest sister-in-law.
Yeah. So Sister Feng argues, hey, I was strictly following etiquette. If someone offends a guest, the host has to punish them to maintain order. She was just doing her job.
What's fascinating here is the completely impossible position of middle management in this family. Sister Feng is caught between enforcing necessary rules to keep the estate running and navigating the incredibly fragile egos of her superiors.
Because she's totally right according to the permanent rules of the estate.
But she gets completely outmaneuvered by the temporary exceptional rules of the birthday. The higher-ups, specifically Wang Furen, just tell her to drop it.
They just pull the rug right out from under her.
They do. Wang Furen dismisses Sister Feng's adherence to etiquette and tells her to drop these empty formalities for the old lady's sake. And by doing that, she essentially castrates Sister Feng's authority in front of the entire household staff.
Which is devastating for someone whose entire power relies on being feared and respected. She is so profoundly humiliated that she actually retreats to her own room to cry in secret.
Because crying publicly at a birthday is another huge violation of protocol.
Right, you can't be the one ruining the vibe. So she's suppressing this intense emotion, and this brings us to a really jarring transition. The matriarch, Jiamu, urgently summons Sister Feng.
So she has to frantically hide her tears.
Exactly. She washes her face, reapplies her makeup, and presents this flawless exterior. And when she arrives, the conversation just pivots wildly to these opulent gifts.
The author uses that whiplash so intentionally. The personal psychological toll of management is just instantly paved over by extreme materialism.
Let's talk about those gifts because the text spends a lot of time describing these folding screens. Sister Feng catalogs 16 different families who sent folding screens.
And these aren't just room dividers. These are massive political artifacts.
Oh, absolutely jaw-dropping wealth. The absolute best one is from the Yuanyang family. It's a massive 12-panel red satin tapestry, and it uses a kexi weave, which is this agonizingly slow silk tapestry technique.
Museum quality, basically.
Yeah. It features a design of a bed full of officials' tablets, symbolizing ultimate political success. And it's covered in gold-flecked 100 longevity characters.
Not to mention the rare glass screen from the Wu family.
Right. So they're just casually sorting through unimaginable wealth. And Jiamu just tells Sister Feng to put the two best screens aside because she might want to give them away later as gifts.
The casualness is what gets me. But it really sets up the striking juxtaposition in the very next scene.
Yes, the Buddha beans. Immediately after discussing these priceless political alliances and showing cutthroat internal politics, the aristocratic women sit down to sort beans.
Picking beans while chanting the Buddha's name.
Yeah, Jiamu, Sister Feng, the nuns, they pick through beans, chant to build good karma for the birthday, with the plan to boil them and have servants hand them out to peasants at the crossroads the next day.
It's so performative. This family is obsessed with extreme materialism, and yet they meticulously perform these pious rituals to appear virtuous.
They want to accumulate spiritual currency with the same administrative efficiency they use to hoard silk screens.
Exactly. They sit in their luxurious halls chanting over beans and then outsource the actual physical labor of compassion to their servants. It's status performance completely devoid of humility.
And that performative virtue at the top is constantly undermined by what's happening with the staff. Which brings us to Yuanyang. She is a sharp-eyed maid, Jiamu's most trusted confidant, and she immediately uncovers the truth.
She sees right through the polite fictions.
She notices Sister Feng's swollen eyes right away. Sister Feng tries to play it off, saying her eyes are just itchy, joking that no one would dare cross her on the old dowager's birthday.
But Yuanyang doesn't buy it.
Not for a second. Later, Yuanyang reveals to the matriarch exactly what happened, that Lady Sheng was bullying Sister Feng.
And Jiamu's reaction here is brilliant. She immediately sees through the petty politics. She defends Sister Feng completely.
She acts like the ultimate omniscient CEO.
She really does. She explicitly states that Sister Feng was right to uphold the family's etiquette regarding the offended guest. She knows Lady Xin was just venting her own pent-up anger and using the birthday as an excuse.
Jiamu relies on Sister Feng to be the ruthless enforcer so the estate doesn't collapse into anarchy. It transitions perfectly to Jiamu's command regarding the poorer relatives.
Ah, yes. Shi Luan and Si Jie.
Right. These two poorer girls are visiting. And Jiamu sends a message to the staff, explicitly warning them to treat these girls well. She notes, in her own words, that the servants have a wealth-loving heart and two snobbish eyes.
That phrase is just a scathing indictment of her own household.
Or is so vivid.
The person at the very top of the hierarchy is acutely aware of the toxic snobbery rotting her own household staff. Because the family values proximity to wealth and power above all else, the servant class naturally evolves to only respect money.
And Jiamu has to constantly micromanage to keep it in check. She can't fix the culture. She can only issue preemptive threats to protect specific vulnerable people.
The administrative burden of policing, that inherent cruelty, has to be exhausting.
Speaking of exhaustion, we see that mirrored perfectly down in the garden. We get a garden inventing session with the younger generation and the managers.
Where Yuanyang and Tanchin are just letting it all out.
Yeah, they're chatting and just complaining about the new generation of servants. They say the newer staff are impossible to please. They're constantly backstabbing, always complaining.
Tanchin is hyper-aware of the internal sabotage. She makes this really profound observation about the illusion of glamour.
That quote is incredible. She basically says, outsiders look at this family and see these happy, wealthy ladies. But inside, they face unspeakable troubles and difficulties.
It perfectly captures the psychological toll of their social standing. They are exhausted from managing this intricate web of rules and maintaining the illusion of perfection for the outside world.
And then, contrasting all these stressed out women, you have Baoyu.
The young male heir.
He strolls into this conversation and he is just classic Baoyu. While the women are agonizing over the estate's survival, he claims he just wants to eat, sleep, and play with the girls day by day.
He is totally detached.
He explicitly says he doesn't care what happens after he dies. He literally says if he dies today or tomorrow, whatever, he's satisfied. And the women actually scold him for talking nonsense.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you have to look at the sustainability of this entire estate. The women are carrying the entire administrative and emotional burden of keeping the family afloat.
They are exhausted from managing the roles.
Right. While the privileged male heir, the one structurally designated to eventually lead them, is willfully ignorant of the future. His nihilism is an existential threat to their survival. He rejects the responsibility required to maintain the very wealth that lets him philosophize in the garden in the first place.
That willful blindness makes what happens later that night so much more intense. Here's where it gets really interesting.
The tone shift is dramatic.
It goes from these brightly lit, hyper-polite birthday halls down into the dark, hidden reality of the garden at night. Yuanyang is walking back alone. It's dark. There's just a faint moon, no lanterns.
The garden at night is this liminal space where all the unsanctioned realities happen.
Exactly. So Yuanyang steps behind a large rock and a cassia tree for a quick bathroom break, and she hears rustling clothes.
She thinks it's a prank at first.
Yeah, she calls out, joking she's going to call the guards to catch a thief, but she has accidentally stumbled upon Siqi.
Who is a very high-ranking maid.
Right. Siqi is having a forbidden secret rendezvous with her male cousin, Pan Yuan.
And the panic from the source material here is so visceral.
It's terrifying. The boy crawls out from behind the tree and starts kowtowing. The text specifically says he kowtows like garlic being mashed.
Such a violent, evocative image.
They grab her legs, weeping, begging for their lives. Yuanyang is terrified herself. She promises silence and manages to escape just as the guards announce the gates are being locked.
And we really need to emphasize to the listener why this is so critical. In a house obsessed with public face and strict etiquette, a secret romance isn't just a faux pas.
It's a matter of literal life and death for the servants involved.
Because the hypocrisy of the masters requires the absolute rigidity of the servants to function. Lady Jing can weaponize Buddhist mercy, the family can outsource their karma, but the servants are expected to be flawless, sexless automatons.
An unauthorized romance is an unforgivable contamination of the household's reputation. If caught, they face severe beatings, being sold off, or even being driven to suicide to expunge the shame.
The stakes are existential.